In a world where digital currencies reign supreme, one cryptocurrency is poised to redefine the game. Litecoin's resurrection and resurgence is coming, and the Litecoin forecast is your 24/7 guide to riding this silver surge. Join us as we stream continuously, analyzing every move, discussing macroeconomic trends, what's driving this bull market, what narratives will come into play as we move higher, and what we'll be watching for signs of a broad market top T. The Litecoin forecast illuminating the path to redemption, hosted by Litecoin, joining us now.
What's up, guys? Turn this down. Is my audio okay? Let's turn that off. Just reading the chat here, waiting a sec for people to get in. Seems like some people were asking about this lower time frame pullback that we had. Some were sort of worried that, you know, this delayed the odds of us breaking higher. I really don't think so. So we originally broke out today, and we're just retesting this level that we had broken out from. Let me move this over. As support, we were on a TD9 sell signal on the 1 hour time frame, which, hey, let me turn this back up real quick. My headphones are messed up. Sorry about that. Put this Send It to the Moon song on. Alright. You guys hear me? Hello? Hello? Usually I can hear myself. What's up, Anthony? Let me know if you can't hear me. Or if you can. Okay, you can. Cool. Thank you for that. Like I was saying, we run a 1 hour TD9 sell signal here. Generally has been a pretty good sign of a short-term pullback. And I did not expect Bitcoin to dump that hard. But honestly, as long as Bitcoin, in my opinion, doesn't make another dramatic move down, because of the way the LTC BTC chart looks here, I'm not thinking that even if Bitcoin slightly corrects, Litecoin's not going to continue higher. On the 1 hour and 4 hour time frame, this looks pretty bullish, looks constructive, just retesting the area that we had broke down on. And I think this could break out in the next few hours, actually. And there's not much resistance until significantly higher on the LTC BTC pair. And then on the dollar pair, I was saying earlier, roughly 165. I don't see much resistance until this level. It's historically acted as pretty significant resistance and support, like 165 to 185 roughly. If we can break through there, then the next level is all-time highs. It's like we had talked about previously. But how are you guys feeling about this low time frame price action? I think everyone gets scared on any small move down because Litecoiners have PTSD. from going down only for so long against Bitcoin and Ethereum, everything else. I think we're on the verge of breaking out against the altcoin market cap. Music is a little loud. Okay. I'm just trying to read the chat on my phone, but it's kind of hard. John actually sent me a new monitor, so once that gets in, we should be in a lot better position. I'm gonna close my door real quick. Who's the artist? I just created it on the AI app. So not really anyone. And I'm gonna try to fix my headphones real quick. I'm sorry, it sounds weird now. Okay, this is way better. What's up, guys? Let me catch up on the comms here. 1450 on LTC BTC is resistance. Or you look forward to my streams nowadays? Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I do really appreciate it. You don't truly trust anything in this market, even though I try to. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the volatility is insane, especially for Litecoin since it's been ranging for 3 years. Psychologically, it's tough, but I think we've switched from that ranging environment to a trending environment, and it's very unlikely, in my opinion, that we're going to see really steep pullbacks in the next few months, or at least in the next few weeks. You've been scooping the dip? Yeah, I think we're in sort of buy the dip mode. Write conclusions in the screen or something for those who arrived late. Yeah, I wish there was a way. I feel like people come in here and then I get the same questions, or I feel like I have to repeat myself multiple times. I don't really know what to think of the Bitcoin chart right now. I thought this was going to continue higher for one more move and then a correction. But this was a pretty dramatic move down. I wonder if it was mainly due to liquidations. We can look here real fast. Let's see. Get total open interest. And then if you guys can think of any questions you might want me to ask David. So yeah, there's a lot of leverage longs here. I got liquidated. That's a pretty... I mean, I guess it was all this whole rally above 100K. Maybe somebody really wanted to see 100K, and so they leveraged themselves long. And Renegade Investor dropped 100,000 BTC song. It's hilarious. I'll check it out after the stream. Bitcoin is getting jealous of other coins. I mean, I think Bitcoiners will get jealous of other coins pumping. And they'll chase altcoins. 145 gets us past H-bar. That'd be cool. Yeah, I think Litecoin's way more valuable than H bar from a fundamental standpoint, and especially long term. Unfair in Reddit that you get banned in Bitcoin for mentioning LTC. Yeah, the moderators of Reddit are kind of weird, like Nazis. You can only promote the chain that they own. See if China bids tonight. Yeah. Have they been? I haven't really been tracking that, if we've been pumping overnight or not. I think it's been pretty random. But the volume on Coinbase has definitely been higher than on Binance. For Litecoin at least. I just really want to see if we can break higher here in the LTC BTC pair. This move was pretty strong that we had after breaking up here, 35%, but I think the next move should be quite a bit stronger. If you think about this from an Elliott wave perspective, if this is 1-2, then the third move up, second move higher, wave 3 should be the strongest, and it kind of aligns with the resistance levels on the dollar pair as well as BTC. Litecoin ETH kind of looks the same, but I think Ethereum looks stronger than Bitcoin here, so LTC ETH should rally not as hard as LTC BTC. What about XRP? That looks pretty bearish. So if Litecoin can move while XRP kind of falters off, should capture the retail or average person's attention. Let's look at LTC XRP real quick. I think we're on a 9, the TD sequential on multiple time frames. Did have bullish RSI divergence here, at least on the daily time frame. I don't know about the 3-day, not on the 3-day, but on the daily. What if we just make it back to the highs? Probably 125%. I think we'll see something like December of 2020 here, where we wicked down, nuked lower, and then rallied above these previous highs. What's my price target for taking profits personally? Mine's mainly like time-based. I don't really have a specific price target. I think with Litecoin, especially in the final parabolic stages of this rally, if we do indeed see that with Bitcoin, which I think is most likely, like into March, that if my assumptions about high Bitcoin fees come into play and Litecoin potentially taking on $1 billion+ of daily transaction volume from Bitcoin, it should have one of the most extreme rallies that we've kind of ever seen in crypto. So I don't really have price targets. We'll see where we're at. I'll look for on-chain and technical signals of a top. But it's hard to know right now. I really want to see what happens the next few weeks. If we really can push up to 165, which I think is likely this week, and well, within the next few days through the weekend. And then if we can clear this cluster of resistance between 165 and 185, then I think all-time highs are likely. And I don't think the cycle top will be in the next few weeks. And if my assumptions come true, if we find support around all-time highs or break it and find support, retest all-time highs, then I really do think that final rally will be pretty insane. I think we see a break towards 1440 on the Bitcoin pair in the next hour. It's so hard to predict for me in the next hour, but it looks bullish. I mean, this did not pull back hardly at all. I don't really like cracking exchange for volume indicators. Get a very short-term time frame. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe in the next hour. It'll be cool. It's cool for the stream when price pumps. What's up, Peace? Thanks for coming back. You agree? I think once we go parabolic, we'll get the narrative change that we've needed, and it'll be onwards and upwards finally. I agree. You know, it's such a drastic difference in sentiment and narrative that's possible for Litecoin, right? From going to being considered as a useless copy chain to potentially the second Bitcoin chain, which is in reality what it is. That's probably the largest sort of divergence between expectations and reality that we've ever seen in crypto, right? If Bitcoin's supposedly going to $10 trillion market cap, and people realize that, you know, actually it has a monetization limit, and that there will be two chains that, at least two chains, maybe three, that converge in network activity and price, and Litecoin's the next to be monetized, then yeah, especially because supply side is so restricted, like we've showed with the miner reserves being at all-time lows and LTC hodler balances being at all-time highs. You can see a lot of speculative demand, but also transactional demand at the same time. So I've said a lot of times and compared this to Michael Saylor, like leverage buying a few $1 billion of Bitcoin. Well, if Litecoin can steal a few $1 billion of Bitcoin's daily transaction volume, it's kind of the same effect, but Litecoin's more illiquid on the supply side. It would happen during alt season where speculation is high into alts, and generally capital flows into the coins that are pumping the hardest in alt season. Those it seems to isolate and center around a few assets, right? And last cycle was Doge, Solana, and Avalanche. Litecoin could be I think has a high chance of being the winner, and people en masse sort of chasing it. You're in Scotland? What time is it over there? Thanks for coming, even though it might be super early in the morning. Feel it in your gut? Yeah, I don't know for sure, to be honest, but I just made a set of assumptions, and I think all the assumptions I'm making are fairly likely to play out. Daily super trend held well last cycle, most of the way up. I've never used that indicator. The last guest, Tony, said the top could be January 20th. Yeah, he has a thesis around that. He showed us yesterday. If you want to check out the stream, about like an hour in or so, I think he was going over that. He was combining technical analysis with expected sentiment, or sort of multiple technical analysis concepts he was combining into one to find confluence. So one was based on time cycles, the other one was his Elliott wave count, and then he had a channel drawn and aligned it with expected expectations of inauguration day being, you know, super euphoric. Oh, it's late at night. I see. It's like maybe 5-6 hour time difference from here. Why is Litecoin still in this level? I think partially because the broader market pulled back and there was quite a bit of long liquidations, but it looks good. I mean, it hasn't, it finally was able to break through this 135 level and then retested it as support. So it's kind of just basing out before the next leg up, in my opinion. You just need a little patience, because honestly, every pair chart looks pretty bullish. So as long as Bitcoin doesn't absolutely nuke lower right away, either meanders sideways or continues grinding up, then Litecoin should make that move. Is liquidation the same as consolidation? No, liquidation just refers to like people who were leverage trading. Like say you're on Binance and you want to have 10x leverage. So you put $1,000, but you want to take a $10,000 position, you can borrow the money. But if the price goes down below your liquidation price, you're forced to sell all your coins. So it's really just forced selling. Consolidation is just when price is grinding within a range or not moving impulsively. So you could think of this small correction as consolidation above the support level that it just broke out of. Do you guys have any questions for David though, so I can write some down in case you're not here later? You got 115 Litecoin, should you sell them? Up to you. I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not selling. But everyone's situation is different. I obviously think the price can accelerate pretty rapidly within a pretty short amount of time, so I'm not. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, for sure. People are scared. I know that's typically how initial stages of a bull market happen, right? Everyone's still psychologically conditioned to fear that every rally is going to retrace. It's referred to as climbing the wall of worry, which is good, right? If sentiment is that way, that is bullish. Now, anything can happen. Just because sentiment's that way doesn't mean that price can't go back down, but it's better than if everyone felt max bullish. That will change though. If price does make a pretty rapid move to all-time highs, I'm sure people will still be anxious. I honestly think Litecoin will consolidate and have corrections in the next 3-4 months. But I think nobody will really believe in the rally most of the way up. Fair price $300, fair price is $1,700. Yeah, everyone has different expectations, different differences in understanding, perspectives. I have my own. West Coast 8 hour, East Coast 5 hours. Oh, I see. So it's like midnight there. I had a friend that went to Scotland for like a few semesters in college. Oh, lots of new eyes. Could go over that. Yeah, we have a few minutes. I could just re-explain the whole fundamental case that I've made for Litecoin pretty repeatedly on this channel. So if you've seen it before, sorry, it's a repeat, but basically I've seen Litecoin as the second Bitcoin chain that's being monetized. The reason why Litecoin is gaining in transactions, so this pink chart here is Litecoin transactions. The primary driving force or catalyst for increased Litecoin transactional growth and monetization for like real world transactions has been increases in the Bitcoin fee level. So as more people adopt Bitcoin, there's not really a scaling solution. Yes, there were proposed solutions, but both of them didn't really manifest to anything. And so kind of the market's path of least resistance is just adopting a second chain with very similar properties. So Litecoin's almost the same as Bitcoin. Yeah, it has a new privacy feature, which some argue that it's better. I tend to believe that, but realistically, it's the same value proposition. And if you notice, price has basically tracked its network transactions. Because most of these transactions over time have been about the same value, it should continue to track 1-to-1. And so in trying to understand why price had struggled and not been able to keep up with its organic transactional growth, was primarily because miner reserves started selling off. So miners had held a ton of Litecoin, 8 million coins back in 2021, and had consistently dumped throughout this range, such that there was hardly any speculative interest in Litecoin anymore because price struggled for so long. But the miner who had been selling all the coins basically has zero, and total miner reserves is at like 1.2, 1.3 million. There's really not much supply left by the largest marginal seller here, such that because we're in a time of increased speculation in altcoins, and because we have this divergence between network activity and price, it's likely Litecoin does eventually kind of revert to the mean. And given my expectation of the final stages of this bull market, and we are starting to see increased transaction fees on Bitcoin, I'm expecting when Bitcoin makes its final move for fees to go to new all-time highs, that would price out a lot higher value transactions in Bitcoin than normally, and Litecoin's typically the chain that captures those. So transactions should move higher, but also the average value of those transactions, such that total network activity on Litecoin can increase at least an order of magnitude, which would mean if it's, network value today is roughly $500. If you assume this idea is correct, it can move really aggressively because it's already undervalued today, but it should become extremely more used as a money at the higher value ranges. So add that with speculation and people likely chasing coins that pump the most. Bitcoin has a very good setup. And then on a technical basis, we've just been in this long-term consolidation. Generally, the longer you consolidate, the more rapidly and vertically you move out of that consolidation. So hopefully that was a decent recap on that. Yeah, it was total Litecoin transactions. So we'll have David in here, and we all have lots of thoughts, but no one knows. Yeah, markets are complex, so we don't really know the full story, but given how large of a percentage of the supply they controlled and how much they did dump, it definitely was a factor. I think the largest factor. So we'll wait here for David. I'm going to message him real quick that we're ready whenever he is. Oh, he's in here. I'll go ahead and add David to the stage. If you guys aren't familiar, David's the director of the Litecoin Foundation. And before I add him, I'll show you here. At Twitter, his Twitter handle is @daddycool1991. He's been involved in Litecoin Foundation, I believe, since 2017. They've been working really hard. So we're going to get him in here. I'll add him to the stage right now. Hey, David, can you hear me? I'll turn down this music.
Hey, Matt.
How's
Can
it
you hear me?
going?
Good, good.
I can. One sec. Let me try to turn down my headphone volume.
Was I screaming in your ear?
Yeah, I think I just turned the volume up too loud. 1 second. Sorry, this is live, so sometimes I have some technical difficulties. But how are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Not too bad. Not too
Awesome. Where are you at nowadays? I know you were in the Midwest before, right? And
I've been
then
all
I've
over
seen you
the
post
place.
pictures.
Yeah. Right now I'm back up
Gotcha.
in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
We had another storm last night. I think it hit like, for anybody who's in Celsius land, it was like minus 12 Celsius or whatever.
Oh,
13.
geez.
So winds were like 50 miles an hour.
Wow,
That's fun.
that's rough.
Yeah.
I've been lucky. I used to live in Colorado and Wyoming, and those winters were pretty bad, especially in Wyoming. But now I'm in Puerto Rico, and it's been nice.
Yeah, where in Wyoming were you?
In a town called Casper. It's like central Wyoming.
Yeah, I was in
that's where I'm
Cheyenne.
originally from.
Yeah, I was in Cheyenne for a little while at FE Warren. So.
Oh, really?
Exactly what you're talking about with Wyoming.
Yeah, it's cold and windy. Like that area between like Cheyenne and Laramie, if you've ever driven on the like interstate from Cheyenne north, it's crazy. There's always trucks blown over.
Yeah, I used to joke. I know this is like mid 90s, right? But I used to joke around. The Cheyenne was pretty much tumbleweeds and drive-up liquor stores.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's how it is. That's where my dad's side of the family is actually from. So we're always in Cheyenne. But good thing is it's relatively close to Denver. So you have something to go do if you get bored.
Like 45 minutes from, I think, Fort
Collins.
Fort Collins, yeah. Something like that.
That's a cool place. Yeah. Anyways, I wanted to I don't know if I sent you an outline. Sorry, apologies if I didn't. I've been doing a lot of these back to back. Okay. So it's typically pretty just conversational. I thought I'd first start off because I've been starting off with a lot of other guests, asking them how they got involved in this space. And I've never really heard your story, but I know you've been involved with the Litecoin Foundation since I started following Litecoin in 2017. So how did you first get involved in the crypto space? What attracted you to it?
It's interesting. So probably around 2012, 13, I was still in the military. I was at the tail end of my career, and I'd heard about Bitcoin, but obviously it wasn't necessarily in a good light at that time. Still interested in it. And I think even one of my sons at the time might have mentioned something about it. He was about 18 or so, and looked into it. And then I didn't really go too much further into it when I had seen some of the troubles it was going through. And when I say troubles, I mean whatever the mainstream media was feeding me for information at the time. But I had a top secret compartmental clearance, and so I didn't want to lose anything with any questionable activities or whatever else. So I just sort of tucked that away in my head and didn't really think about it for a few years. And then in 2016, I was looking for some different dividend stocks or stocks to invest in, and I had heard about John McAfee going and being the CEO of a small little company that was probably at like $0.25 per share at the time, and it just started shooting up because he was talking about changing it into a Bitcoin mining company. So rather than looking at Bitcoin itself, I was looking at the Bitcoin mining company, which of course failed, but never bought any Bitcoin. And I think at that time, like it was around $400 to $600 per Bitcoin. But
Gotcha.
being part of the traditional finance world and not really, again, looking into it very much, I was more interested in the stock that might do something with it than the actual Bitcoin itself. So that was probably one of the worst decisions. Yeah, it's probably one of the worst financial decisions I've ever made, right? So that's 2016. And then in 2017, we sold our home at the time, and we were in between places, and I had some extra money to invest, and I felt like the stock market was bloated at that time. It was at, I think the New York Stock Exchange was around 21,000.
I see.
And so I took all of my money out of that that I had, and I was looking for something else, and started researching Bitcoin. And it's kind of like at the beginning of, remember 2020, November, December 2020, it started perking a little bit. And same thing happened around that time in 2017. When I was looking at it, it was already August 2017. So I bought my first 0.1 Bitcoin at the time, and started researching the 3 that were on Coinbase, which it took me three attempts to actually get my account open because the bank kept trying to stop me from opening an account on Coinbase at the time.
Yeah, it was really rough in the early days setting up exchange accounts.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it was like for people before that even. Like we're talking, the 2010 to 2016 time period,
Yeah, and they had like no customer support, so if something happened, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I was more interested in, right? Because they were telling me I couldn't. And like any red-blooded American, I'm not going to have somebody tell me what I can't do. So I started looking into it more, and got really interested in what I could understand from the tech at that time, which, for me, I thought I understood quite a bit. But as time goes by, everybody realizes they don't really know that much until much further on, right? And even then, we're all still learning. So bumped into Litecoin because it had just been put onto Coinbase probably 6 months prior, and started my entry at around, I think it was 50 something. And so I started looking into Litecoin. Yeah, and I really enjoyed. So I only had that at the time Twitter account because I was trying to follow John McAfee on there to find out what was going on with that company I was telling you about earlier. And so I hadn't really used it much. Yeah, I hadn't used it much. It was just kind of sitting there dormant, right? And then I started asking people. What's that?
Your account grew pretty fast, I think.
Yeah, I'll get into that. That's actually kind of funny you mentioned that. But for the longest time, I think I only had like 22 followers or whatever, and half of them were probably like family or friends, right? And I remember starting to ask around questions about just Bitcoin in general and crypto and whatever. And, you get some information from people on the Bitcoin side, but they seemed fairly, now this is at the time, remember, this is late 2017. They're a bit pretentious and not all of them, but, it seemed like there were more than I was willing to deal with. And so I would ask questions to other groups and other cryptos, and Litecoin just seemed to really have a very welcoming group of people that it didn't really matter how much you knew, they were willing to answer questions and stuff, right? And I really gravitated toward this guy named Charlie because he seemed to be on the level on a lot of things. He even was like trying to forewarn people about the Chinese exchanges being shut down, all kinds of stuff, right? It didn't seem to really be about him so much. So I like people like that. I like salt of the earth, more down to earth people. And so I started looking more into Litecoin because of the community, the potential in Litecoin, of course, Charlie. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like I was just going to mention that communities kind of stayed the same, which is cool to see because I know communities tend to change over time, but it seems like it's maintained that same type of welcoming nature and willingness to answer questions.
I think so. I think for the most part, it's definitely kept a good grounded sort of viewpoint of things. I don't know if that's just because price never got obscene or anything, but I'd like to think
Probably
there's a
to some
certain,
extent.
yeah, it's probably some of it, right? But I think some of it's just a different type of investor too, which is
For sure.
good to hear. So I think it was January of 18. The price is starting to come down now pretty quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was up at a cabin in northern Wisconsin. I was like, man, maybe there's something. I mean, like, what can we do to help? I don't know how to help. I'm not a developer. I'm not any of that. But I just was like, I just put out a tweet about, maybe we can get Spotify to accept Litecoin, and everybody jumped on it. And here's a guy with 22 people following, half of them friends, family, and all of a sudden I got like 2,500 likes on a tweet. I was like, what was that all about? That's really weird. So that just like drew me in even more, because I was like, you get that kind of triggered reaction out of people, and it was all positive, right? I mean, I was like, this is something I can probably rally around. And, by that time I'm out of the military and I love camaraderie. So I was all about it. So in February, I think it was February of 18, Charlie's chatting with people on Twitter about how he's getting flying lessons and learning how to fly a plane and all these other things. Just, banter with people. And some people were asking him how they could help. And he was like, well, you can volunteer at the new foundation that we've created. And so I was one of them that asked him. And he said, in the DM, he goes, send me your email. So I got invited into what was Slack at the time with like 5 or 6 other guys. And I just kind of like sat back for a while and watched how everything operated, because it's never one of those things where you want to go in guns blazing when you have no idea what you're really doing. So I just sat back and studied people and studied what was going on inside of there. A lot of tech talk. So people like Loesch were in there, a few others. There's a guy named eCurrency Hodler who's still around today. He's the one who started the Light School and a few other things, if anybody remembers that. And he kind of became my mentor in a way at the foundation, and I owe a lot to him. But that's when I started volunteering, and I volunteered for about 8 to 10 months and put together the first Litecoin Summit, and the rest is history from there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was going to ask you about how you got involved with the foundation. That's cool to hear. It's so they had an old Litecoin Foundation, right? And then they set up this new one.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened with the prior foundation?
No, I think it just was not functioning the way that they had desired it to function, was my understanding. And so they dismantled it and created the one that we know now, with a core group of like 4 or 5 individuals. And then they started recruiting in some volunteers. And I think they had, some devs, obviously, that were working on some things already. And they were trying to help, devs with whatever they needed. And that's kind of how the current one, I think it started spring or summer of 17. And so I came in about 6 months after it was originally created, but it didn't really start, swinging, like doing a lot of stuff, until probably early 2018.
Yeah. I remember a lot of the early things they did, but it seems like the foundation's progressed a lot and gotten a lot better over time. So how do you see it, since you've been involved directly for like 8 years roughly, or 7-8 years? How has it changed, like from those early days? Like, what were the focuses early on, and how did that change over the course of time?
I think early on the focus was really, you got to remember, this is from a viewpoint of somebody who just stepped in there when things were already going at that time. But it just seemed to me like there was a lot of dev-related stuff, and they were still trying to feel themselves out on the rest of it, right? So like the organization was put up, they're trying to start populate with people. Obviously, the idea of bringing in volunteers to help was introduced, and they started bringing in a few here and there, and I just was lucky enough to be a part of that. And from there, they started expanding, some of it intentional, some of it just by chance, on in certain areas, right? So like some parts would grow faster than others. So I think it was, I don't remember how far along it was into it. I was there maybe a month or something. And I was like, have you guys ever done conferences before? Because it seems like that's kind of a thing to do right now, right? And they were like, well, no, we never have done one. And they go, do you want to do it? And I was like, in my head, I'm going, I've done, I've helped coordinate conferences before in the military for generals and so on and so forth. So, that everything from how they, when they come in, land on their planes, take them to their hotels, I knew all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? This should be really similar. But I mean, running a conference for decentralized crypto is a lot different than running a conference that you've had been run years before you were ever a part of it. And so there's templates in place, and a lot of these guys at that level, they can take care of themselves. And so I was a little over my head, but I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. But there were enough great people involved in those first couple of conferences that we kind of just learned it all together.
Yeah, some of those early conferences were cool. I think you guys had the 2019 one in Las Vegas, and had like a really high turnout. A lot of cool people came, and it seems like they've gotten better. At least the most previous one I thought was the best one so far. So I've noticed a good improvement every year, even though the hype and price increase hasn't been there, and we were kind of at the lowest price on against a lot of other cryptocurrencies. Back when you did the one for this year, it seemed like it had the highest level of mind share, highest level of people interested and engaged, which was really cool to see. But I cut you off before you were able to finish yours too.
Once I get on a roll, it's kind of hard for me to stop, but I apologize for that. But I just, it's triggering a lot of memories for me, and they're good memories, so I kind of like start spewing them out. But
for sure, it's interesting to hear, and it's cool to know that you were the one that came up with the idea. I actually think they've been the thing I remember most, as far as like marketing goes for Litecoin. I think they've been the most beneficial source of marketing. I know you guys funded, or someone funded several sports team like Dolphins partnerships and UFC, but I always like the conferences the best.
I was involved in all those things, the sponsorships and all those. They fell under my purview, but I think the conferences have been the highest quality marketing that we've done to this point anyway. And that's how we approached it. So we never really looked at it like, okay, this is going to make us a lot of money for the foundation or anything. You kind of hope at some point it progresses to that. But literally all four of the ones that we've had to this point have been in a bear market. We've never had one where it's good vibes. It's always been at the pits of, whatever, bear market we're in at the time. So the 2018 one, I think the excitement was there because it was the first one, right? And that was in South San Francisco, and that was a blast. I had a lot of fun there, but I got to tell you, I was pretty overwhelmed from a coordinator, like coordinating it. Not so much prior, but on the ground itself. Once there was this whole buzz and there's people everywhere, and the amount of people that are looking for you to have direction on some things that were going on, because we had multiple rooms having people speaking. There was a lot going on, right? And I joke about this, but I mean, at one point, I literally found the utility closet and sat in there for a while just to get a break from everybody. People still found me, so the next thing I knew, I had like 3 people sitting in the utility closet with me talking shop and stuff. But
that's hilarious. Yeah, well, there wasn't a lot of hype in 2017, so and I'm sure I'm not that familiar with it. Was there a video conference of that one? I don't ever remember seeing it, but
I think it can't. I don't remember if it was live. I think it might have come out afterwards, because again, we were learning a lot of this stuff on the fly.
For sure.
And the conference venue itself, the South San Francisco venue, was really nice, and kind of made sure we didn't step on our toes on a few things. So it went pretty well. but there's always room for improvement. So 2019 was the one that was in the Cosmopolitan in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one where we had Dr. Ron Paul as the keynote. That had a different buzz to it than the first one. The first one was like, oh my God, we can all get together and talk about Litecoin. And there were a lot of things that just happened in that bull market. But the 19 one, you're in the pits of a bear market, but there was still this excitement about what was going on, and the space hadn't become too commercialized yet. So you're just starting to see some of that. So that was interesting. And then we had a 2-year break, 20 and 21, because of some of the unfortunate events that were going on in the world. And then 22 was in Vegas again at the Link. And that was a good one. And you could sort of see the progression of the maturation of what we were doing, because we had the same people now coming back and helping with these conferences. And then, of course, I'm sorry, was it 22? Yeah, 22. And then 23, we didn't have one. We had the cruise. And then this year, we had the one in Nashville. And I think that one was definitely, from, like you said, everything from the mind space everybody was in to the setting itself. It was all really fun, and there was a lot of good information that was put out through those 2 days. So we're really psyched about the next one that's coming up next year too.
You guys have plans for that one, like where it's going to be and what time frame?
Yeah, it's all set already. We're just waiting to get the website up and have some things put in place before we announce it, but everything's already locked in.
Gotcha. That's cool. I'll probably be at that one. I've never come to one, but it would be fun to get up for sure.
Yeah, it'll be good, especially with the kind of the refacing of what we've done with, like, at least the X account so far. And we can probably get into marketing and some other stuff, but the X account was the first sort of retooling of how we approach certain demographics and how people perceive marketing and stuff. It's a full effort from a collective of people. It's not one individual or anything. So
yeah, I thought that was a good idea. I mean, that's what was catching the speculative kind of fervor and hype in this market, at least the last year. So I thought it was a super smart thing. And like one of the first tweets that you guys made went viral. And so that was pretty awesome. And you guys have done a good job. So it's a collective team of people that's kind of talking and discussing what to exactly say or which audience you're trying to target. How do you guys go about planning those tweets?
It's so we do end up having an individual who's pretty much manning the actual, like, posting of it. But the mindset is one where the information that was put out for the longest time was very valuable, right? Like, there's a lot of metrics and data and information that would get put out. But it just seemed like there was a different direction in which a lot of entities or individuals were using X that were sort of garnering more attention, right? So just imagine a whole room full of people all yelling at each other, looking for each other's attention. And whoever's the most unique or entertaining or whatever would normally end up getting the most attention, right? So we figured, well, probably need to change how we're approaching this, because it's business. The business approach is good. It's a decentralized money, cryptocurrency. It does a lot of good things, and it's a lot of attributes to it that need to be heralded. But at the same time, you can kind of tick up the fun factor and do a few other things that sort of grab people's attention. And luckily that one post that went out, from my understanding, was just for fun. It was an accidental viral, which I'm guessing that's how that happens quite often. But this one was an accidental viral, and we ended up getting a mascot out of it and a lot of attention. And so we just kind of rode that. And so the mindset behind all that was, okay, well, how do we take this gift we've gotten through the mascot Lester and sort of create a marketing push out of it? And so, let the intern do their thing. Let Lester become the mascot. Charlie was always the chicken anyway. Even if you go back to Magical Crypto Friends, Charlie was really technically the chicken. So Charlie becomes the chicken. Lester is Litecoin. It's a 13-year-old who is a little mischievous, but also very well intentioned. Kind of a thing, and go from there. And so that's drawn
cool.
in. It's drawn in a demographic I don't think we really necessarily had a grasp of before, which was that 18 to 35-year-old demographic.
For sure. Yeah. It's funny to me because I saw so many influencers posting about that and how that made them bullish. And honestly, it didn't cost anything to put out that tweet, and it went viral, and it probably brought more attention to Litecoin than a lot of the marketing dollars. Probably more attention than even maybe some of the sports partnerships. So it's funny how that works, and it was kind of on accident. So it's really cool to see. So your guys' plans in the future for that account?
It was
just to try to
the plans are to sort of No, it's to keep it going, grow it out. We introduced another character today, Luis, and all of these are very intentional and they're fun. There's no negativity directed at any of the characters, right? So you got Lester, he's Litecoin. You have Leroy. Leroy's who we're using to sort of talk about MWEB, virtual private money, right? It's optional privacy. And then Luis is really more for wrapped Litecoin, maybe remittances or something, cross-border transactions kind of thing. And just kind of grow out those characters and let them explain things or have fun with it so that people are learning. I know there were a few posts where they even had some Glassnode data and had Lester kind of diagonal on the chart going up, right? Saying yodel or whatever. And so it was how many people are going to honestly look at charts and understand that it was actually going up unless Lester's standing there diagonal on the chart and stuff. So, trying to find a funner way to still present information that's valuable, but have some fun with it.
I wanted to ask you this because it just jogs my mind about something the community's talked about quite a bit. It seems, or at least some have speculated, that Litecoin was being censored off of some crypto media outlets. I remember recently when Charlie was supposed to speak at one of the summits, they cut him off the live stream before he gave his talk, and then we were never able to really see him speak. And then there's been some exchanges where they provide a list of top 5 longest running cryptocurrencies, and Litecoin wasn't on there. I've noticed that, as well as on some other data providers or exchanges. It seems like they're kind of purposely leaving Litecoin out or forgetting about it. What do you make of that censorship? Do you think it's intentional, or do you think it's just they made mistakes?
Well, I've been dealing with this since, like I said, 2018, being a part of the foundation. And first you kind of wonder, what's the deal with this? And then as time has gone by, I've actually encountered quite a few instances where there was no mistake that it was intentional, right? I'm sure there were some random ones where it was just they just really didn't do the research very well or whatever, and they just took whatever they thought was hot at the time and threw it up there. But there has definitely been some intentionality behind lack of coverage, lack of inclusion in certain platforms or whatever, and intentional suppression, whether that be growth or price or both, actually. There's plenty of things I could probably tell you about. Some of them kept to myself for a long time, actually, and some others, but it's frustrating.
I have some questions on that because I've noticed anomalies through looking at on-chain data, and I'm not sure if you don't if you're not comfortable answering it, it's okay. But didn't Galaxy Digital reach out at one point
Mhm.
to the Litecoin Foundation asking to borrow or looking for large Litecoin holders that they could borrow like massive amounts of Litecoin from? And
Mhm.
hypothetically, the only reason they would want to do that is so they could sell it, short it.
Right.
In my mind, that did happen, right?
Yeah, that happened because they asked me. So
Oh,
there was,
wow.
yeah, it was a coordinated, it was calls and emails to set up just, like there's introductory calls that normally happen. Hey, how's it going? How's the weather there? Yeah, what are you doing at the foundation? Blah, blah, blah. And then, normally then the intentions come out and it was like, hey, where can we find, larger amounts of Litecoin? And just like, well, we're a nonprofit and it's a decentralized crypto and we intentionally don't hold a lot of, crypto in general, right? Or money. It's all donation driven, and we try to keep any self interest out of it. So it's a very thin, very shoelace, very bootstrap type of foundation. Some of it's very intentional, and so we've had to let down a lot of people who have looked for Litecoin, either for liquidity reasons or for like what Galaxy was trying to do.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's super interesting because it's weird that they would ask around for large Litecoin
Mm-hmm.
holders so that they could borrow it. And then you see the censorship in alignment with that. You don't necessarily see the shorts on exchange books, but it's possible in my head that they could have, done this over the counter or off exchange books and would have potentially resulted in a like price suppression. And I don't know if you've checked out these stats, but the miner reserves for Litecoin, which is, in my mind, the entity that somebody that wanted to short Litecoin would reach out to, right? Miners were the largest holders of any coin early on, especially proof of work, because that's the only way you can get the coins out initially is distributing them through mining. But have you looked at these miner reserve stats that I have on the screen before? It's weird with Litecoin because they've sold off more heavily than any other chain, and miners only have roughly like 1% of the circulating supply, and they had been dumping. I could see it on exchange books every time price had started to rally, which is kind of counter to what you would do normally. You let price break out of these major resistance levels and sell at higher prices, not try to sell and liquidate longs and force price lower like on thin liquidity weekends. So it seems like it aligns with everything that we're seeing, from the censorship to the personal ties with Galaxy Digital reaching out to short it. So you've checked
Yeah, I
out
mean,
this data.
even yeah, I've seen it, and even like let's go back to like searching for news, right? When you do searches for news just on Google or whatever, did you mean Bitcoin? Like, there's hardly anything Litecoin, and if they show it, it's like old as dirt stuff, and it's like same thing with YouTube. You go on there, and it's like all I can find is stuff from like 4 years ago. I have to be very intentional to find more recent videos, right? And so
Yeah, it's super interesting.
yeah, and that's just that end, right? So then you think about some of the stories that I have about even companies who, for the longest time, absolutely refused to add Litecoin to them. Most of them were
Yeah, like
Bitcoin. Most of them were Bitcoin only, right? Or Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they just absolutely refused to add Litecoin. BitPay was one of them. I give them
I
credit
remember
now. Yeah, I give them credit now. I mean, back in 21, that's when I met the guy that was running adding new coins to BitPay. They had just added Doge like maybe a month or so earlier, and I was at the Bitcoin Miami, the one that was in this huge warehouse type building, and I met him there, and we talked. And Charlie had been asking them for years to add Litecoin, and then he started asking me to ask them. So I had been on their tail for a couple of years, and they just really weren't interested. And so then when we met in Miami, they had Dogecoin sort of have some success on their platform, And I guess they had an epiphany or aha moment and decided, well, after I'm like, look, you add Litecoin, and I can guarantee you that it will not take long for it to take second place. And I wouldn't even be surprised if it becomes your number one coin. And the guy laughed like, yeah, well, let's get it, up and running, and we'll see how things go. And then they got it added. And sure enough, it took, didn't take very long for it to become number two. And now it's been number one on their platform for the last year. But BitPay is a perfect example of where they intentionally didn't add it for a long time. Blockchain.com was another, a few others. And you can actually go back and look at the statistics on volume and addresses and other things. And if you know the dates, I've done this because obviously I was involved in these, but I go back and look at the dates on the charts, and you can see how once they flip the switch and let those, added Litecoin to those platforms, volume and addresses and things start to go up.
Yeah, and it's interesting from my perspective because as a business, it doesn't cost you much to add Litecoin, but if there's a lot of demand, you can make money off of it. So it seems sort of counter to the natural market incentive why they would resist. It's just kind of strange to me. I wanted to ask you about Charlie a little bit in regards to this because he tweeted something in 2018, a long tweet thread about this type of price suppression. Have you guys talked about that at all? Does he feel the same way, or has he noticed
About
that
talking
too?
Charlie?
Yeah, has Charlie talked about this potential short interest? And
yeah, I mean, he's aware of people shorting it. I mean, we don't. It's frustrating because it's people that you're ending up having to have to partner with or work with or whatever, and it's out there, right? But it seems like it's literally part of this space is people really just don't care what they're doing if they're making money.
For sure.
And I mean, I've told Charlie my frustrations before, and Alan and others, how it's like, if it wasn't for some of the more upstanding people that I get to have the pleasure of working with at the foundation and within the community, I don't know if I'd even be in this space anymore at all, because it just pisses me off so much. But
yeah,
I do believe in the tech, and I do believe in Litecoin's tech specifically, and Bitcoin in many ways. And so I do believe there's advantages for countries and individuals by using it. So that's why I still advocate for it. But a lot of the people that have been in it from very early on until now, businesses are businesses, and what they care about is making money. They can tell you all day long they care about you, but really they care about money.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I understand the frustration. It's been frustrating for a lot of the community, but if they had been having these, large short positions in Litecoin, eventually they have to repay them with Litecoin. And so you would expect, if the demand keeps increasing, that eventually it would just lead to a rapid and violent price rise after the all the minor reserves are sold, or all the short interest has to be paid back. And so maybe that's what we're going to see here shortly, is they ran out of coins, miners don't have any more, they can't borrow anymore, and at some point they have to pay that back. So if it is happening and they have to pay back at much higher prices into thin liquidity, you could see pretty crazy price increases.
Yeah, I think the potential's there for that, especially with what you mentioned about the miners selling off pretty much everything they have. That really creates a base that we're at now where, I mean, short of heavy shorting, going on, what else is there holding it back,
Exactly. Sorry, I didn't actually plan to ask you that, but it just popped into my head while we were talking. I wanted to ask a little bit about all of the technical developments that were ongoing through the foundation's support, because out of all the cryptocurrencies, even Bitcoin, it's probably had a lot more funding than Litecoin, but Litecoin's made some major, huge technological improvements. One of them being the privacy MWEB feature, which has been long talked about as Bitcoin's sort of greatest weakness, is not having any sort of sufficient privacy. So when was MWEB first talked about? Because I can't recall. When did that discussion start?
So that was, I can't remember if we were still in Slack or if it was Discord, but it was a conversation that had come up, and Charlie's always been interested in it, and a few others obviously were advocates of it for, ideological type reasons, having to do with everybody has the right to privacy, right? And there were, obviously a few that were kind of on the fence about it. How's this going to affect us when it comes to exchanges? And so, we had those discussions. I'm pretty sure this started, don't quote me on it, but it was probably somewhere around, it's got to be in the 2020 timeframe. That's my guess. Because it took a while to go through all the, the testing, the development and the testing and all those things until it went live. I think it was February of 2022. It was about a 2-year. So maybe even the discussions were happening in 19. I have to go back and look at some point. Now you got me thinking about that.
Yeah.
So either maybe it was end of 19 or somewhere in 20 where it started, the discussion started. And even then, sorry.
Oh no, I was just thinking about the origin of the MWEB like paper. It sort of was released by this anonymous person.
Yes.
People have theories as to who it was, but that was kind of cool. And I think that was in 2017 or 2018.
It was 16 or 17. Yeah, somewhere in there. I think it was, it could have been 17.
And then who came up with the idea to implement MWEB as an extension block? Was that Charlie?
I believe that was the discussion that took place too, but I'm pretty sure he already kind of had the idea that he's not one to really mess with the base code. And there's always ways to be more efficient with the space that you have. And so I think he had brought up the idea of having, it was either him or I don't know if we had brought on Burkett at that point yet or not. So this is where it starts getting dangerous for me because I'm not 100% sure. But one of those two probably, because the key people at the beginning there kind of figuring all of this out from scratch was Charlie, eCurrency Hodler, and Dave Burkett. And so I think within that group, one of them had to have been like, hey, let's make this an extension block so that we're not, crowding the original, and then we can even make it something that becomes even more efficient for transactions and space, and et cetera.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's like the biggest upgrade that we've seen. It was a little risky. I know Charlie and a lot of people were worried about messing with the base code, but it seems like it's worked flawlessly for the last 2 years, and there haven't been any problems so far, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, I think there might have been like 1 or 2 small bugs that were fixed, but other than that, it's been running great, just like Litecoin itself. So, been very blessed in that way.
It's super impressive. Have you been tracking the Litecoin MWEB balance? Because as I'm looking at this, I've been comparing it to Lightning Network stats, and it's growing at a much faster rate. There's actually more Litecoin and MWEB than there is in capacity on the Lightning Network. And MWEB was funded with almost no money, whereas Lightning Network has had tons of funding and tons of marketing. But this seems like it's getting more adoption. The transactions are growing. It's not as if I pull up the transaction chart, it was slow at first, but it looks like it's actually growing after we've added, or not me, but Cake Wallet and some of these others added mobile wallet support. So that's cool to see. I really think that this could get pretty popular once all these mobile wallets add support for it.
Yeah, there were definitely some baby steps that had to have been taken. It was very deliberate. The biggest, so it was only on Litecoin Core for the longest time. The biggest development, obviously, has been the work between David and especially Hector Chu in getting it prepared for, and now Loesch as well, getting it prepared for being added to other wallets like Cake and
Mhm.
others, coming forward
For
here
sure.
soon. So that obviously would add adoption of MWEB, just like when I was talking about how when BitPay and some of these other larger wallets who did not have Litecoin before added it, then you saw spikes in usage, and that should naturally
Mhm.
happen with MWEB as well. And I do find it interesting that, again, on a shoestring budget, you're able to put a currency altering, paradigm shift type of addition to it, like
Mhm.
MWEB, where you add optional privacy, do that with not much money, and then instead of doing forced consumerism like what was happening with Lightning, and in many ways,
Mhm.
it's like this natural thing where, like, okay, well, let's just get it available on things that people use and let them
Mhm.
decide, right? So you had, what was it, the other day was like 40,000 Litecoin they got added
Yeah.
at one, and I see a lot of it already
Came
came
out,
out of
but
there, but I mean, you're still at 100,000 Litecoin that's
yeah,
on there currently.
yeah, that's a decent chunk. Um, how limited time it's been available. Has that surprised you? The growth has it been more than you expected?
No, I'm a pretty impatient guy, so I actually wish it
Oh,
was
okay.
much further along. But I understand how, and I really very much more now appreciate the deliberate um, manner in which the developers make sure everything is okay before we do anything, right?
For sure. Yeah, because have a lot of adoption, had a mistake and a problem, it would
Oh,
have probably could kill it,
yeah,
so
we're not Solana with like how many
yeah.
VCs behind it, where it doesn't matter if it goes down or not. They're gonna just continue to throw money at it so that it looks successful, right?
Mhm.
With Litecoin, if
Yeah.
if MWeb would have fallen on its face at any point, even if it was just a mild temporary setback, it would have been just absolutely lambasted by other chains, specifically, probably Bitcoiners. But um, luckily, none of
For
that
sure.
happened because they took the time to do everything right. And so they're doing the same thing with adding it to wallets and making it available to other people. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Going slowly, deliberately, and doing it the right way. Because over time, that's what you want. You want a product that works, that's trusted, and people can find value in. I know us as speculators kind of get impatient, but I think that's best for long-term growth too. Last question on MWeb is, there were some regulatory concerns early on. Some exchanges like Binance don't accept MWeb coins. Do you guys still feel like as a foundation that there are some potential regulatory concerns there, like with the ETF application and process? Will that present any hiccups?
no, I don't think MWeb's going to. One, because it's optional, and two, it's such a minimal part of what Litecoin is at the moment that it doesn't
Hmm.
really make an impact on the decision. I think what they really look at more is all the things that they looked at for Bitcoin, which Litecoin checks all of those boxes, right? If anything, they
Hmm.
probably a stronger check mark in there in some respects. So I think for the ETF, in that respect, I think we're fine. With exchanges, there was a campaign to go around, mostly done by Charlie himself, to talk to all the exchanges and find out what their viewpoints were on it. If we were
Hmm.
to do X, what was going to be their move? And they were like, well, obviously, we still have to abide by whatever regulatory things are going on within the countries that we provide our services, but we have no problem as long as the Litecoin that's coming to the exchange is coming through a regular Litecoin address, right? And we won't send it to any
Hmm.
MWeb addresses, and that's what they've pretty much all held to at this point. The only blip you saw was the South Korean exchanges, all five of those.
Hmm.
And that I've learned more about over the last year as well, as to how that all came down. And really, it just comes down to a lack of due diligence by some entities that sort of help enforce those exchanges, and then the
I see.
exchange is just pretty much abiding by it. And so, um, just telling you right
Yeah.
now, this is you have I have some of those same exchanges asking me now, hey, what do you think about having Litecoin added to our exchange, and I'd be like, I think that's great because you went ahead and dropped us a few years ago, and I don't think that was right, and unfortunately. So fortunately, this is the thing: Litecoin's never had to pay to be on anything. Right? It's been a meritocracy with Litecoin. So whenever it's added to something, it's not been paid for, right?
Yeah, it's because people are demanding it, and the
Right.
exchange wants to make money off of it, so it's a
Correct.
win-win.
Correct. Most of your coins and projects now, like they have to pony up. They have to pay to play. So the only thing we're not going to do is if these exchanges want to have us back on, which they would benefit from because the volume's pretty heavy on Litecoin, and I don't see that going down anytime soon. They should just add it, right? But if they come across and are like, we need a relisting fee or we need to have so much liquidity, that's not happening. I mean, you guys are the ones that delisted it, and you need to, make everybody whole and put it back on if you really feel like you made a mistake.
Well, cool. That's cool to hear. Yeah, that's nice to know that they're actually thinking about re-adding Litecoin. I know South Korea in 2017 was a pretty big driver of the bull market. I do remember actually specifically for Litecoin too, South Korea being a heavy buyers in, like, generally prices moving up overnight, and I could see that some of those South Korean exchanges were most heavily buying.
It was a bit of a
back
punch
then.
in the gut. Yeah, they South Koreans did like their Litecoin, so that was a bit of a punch in the gut when they had to shut it down. But it was because of pressure from entities above them, right? So we just got to make that very clear.
Yeah.
This was not like they all individually decided to do this. It was more of a, just like the
Yeah.
Operation Choke Point went on in the States the last few years. It's kind of similar to that. So through lack of knowledge, lack of due diligence, I might add too.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of people think the exchanges are evil, but most of them are just trying to not get in trouble by the governments they operate underneath. And so they just take precautionary measures, or, maybe the regulatory agencies aren't that well run and they just tell them, hey, you can't do this. So it makes sense to me. I wanted to move on to the next recent development for Litecoin, and that's wrapped Litecoin. I was actually pretty excited about this because from my point of view, the natural evolution of money is first, it's like a good medium of exchange. People use it because it delivers some value to them. I think we've seen that proven with Litecoin over time. And then eventually, because of those medium of exchange qualities being there and people needing it, it's better than the other forms of money they're using for whatever purpose they're needing from Litecoin specifically. They're using it. Then it becomes more popular as a store of value. Like we're seeing increased payouts with BitPay because people are preferring to hold on to it, maybe because they think the upside is better, or maybe because they don't want to pay the fees on Bitcoin, or they want the privacy features of Litecoin with MWEB. I see that it evolves this way from medium exchange to store value. And then once it's a store value, people want to earn yield on it. They don't want it to just sit there. So that's why I think it's cool that we're finally seeing, and I know we've seen it in the past, but it didn't necessarily work out that well. But I think Litecoin's in a cool position today because it's so adopted to now be able to generate yield. So how did that idea come about with CoinUT Exchange? I know Jinji Wang had long been in the Litecoin community. Was it him that reached out to you guys to try to do this, or was it a kind of team effort?
Yeah, so for a few years, we were looking to try and have a wrapped Litecoin, talk to different groups that could help facilitate that, but the costs were fairly high. And so it was a cost prohibitive thing. Or it ended up being something where there was interest from the opposite party, and then that interest just went away, right? So weeks turn into months, months turn into a few years, and then there still isn't one, right? So at some point, Shinji, who he's the one who runs the CoinUT exchange that's in Singapore, but I think he also is able to run it in Canada and I think Switzerland. He actually is a director at the foundation, and he was like, hey guys, look, we can create a wrapped Litecoin out of CoinUT. It'll be our product. and you guys, give us some direction or whatever, but it's, we'll go ahead and do a partnership where you can help bring some eyes on it so people know that it's there. We'll create the product so people can now work within the DeFi space with their Litecoin and do things with it. And because we all got frustrated at some point, we're just like, maybe this just doesn't happen. But, it was something just like a stable coin. We'd love to have probably a stable coin of some kind backed or based off of Litecoin too, right? So those are still things that are being looked at, but wrapped Litecoin at some point became more of a low-hanging fruit than maybe it was in the past because of Zinzi offering to help, make it happen. So that's
Gotcha.
that's where that comes from. And so now the thing is to try and get it out there, make people understand and know that it's there and how they can use it, right? And so that's where obviously Luis comes in too from the handles, so that educate people on it. So
Awesome. Are there any stats on there? I know it just launched recently, like a few weeks ago or a month ago, right? And how has it been? Has it been seeing increased like minting of that wrapped Litecoin on CoinUT's exchange?
yeah, I think it's similar to MWEB. It's kind of slow starting, but that's just because you have to get parties interested in different functionalities of it, right? And so then you can build upon those building blocks. So one is obviously trying to get it into a couple wallets. Edge Wallet was excited to add it. Paul Pui from Edge Wallet was like, I can get this up in a day. Let's get it on Edge Wallet. So you can have wrapped Litecoin sitting in your wallet on Edge Wallet, right? And then from there, so CoinUT does the minting and the burning of it, right? One for one exchange, and they mint it, and then you take it wherever you want it to go. So now we have at least one wallet that you're able to store wrapped Litecoin. And so my job is to find more wallets to have them adopt and add it to them. So I've been talking to a few larger wallets or projects that have wallets tied to them to try and get them to incorporate wrapped Litecoin. The next thing that people want to do after having it on a wallet is to be able to swap maybe something into it. So then being able to have swapping features, that's another development that needs to happen. That's not just like adding it to the wallet. And then of course the last part would be staking, right? And that involves having other entities like a Uniswap or whoever else involved. And that's something that's just come about as well. So each of those has a step in order to get everybody the things that they need in order to feel like they're fully able to participate within DeFi with wrapped Litecoin.
For sure. Yeah, I think it could be popular since Litecoin's so popular as a payment method and as a money now. I'd think that naturally these like decentralized exchanges, people who use them would prefer, if they're going to swap into Litecoin to then spend it, prefer to just denominate their trades in wrapped Litecoin. If they're already using it after they make those trades anyway. So it's cool to see. Yeah, hopefully that development does keep progressing on all those steps you mentioned. If someone is interested in wrapped Litecoin that's listening, how do they acquire it? So can anyone set up a CoinUT exchange account like in the US or in Canada?
Yeah, so the question, I think the biggest question, because we have a pretty large group of people within the United States and Canada who are interested in Litecoin, right? Matter of fact, I think the highest concentration of Litecoin holders and users are in the United States, North America. And so CoinUT, if you go on to their website, or if you go to, I think it's wrappedlitecoin.org, if you go to that website and look it up, they have a frequently asked questions area and a few other things. Yeah, if you can bring it up right now, that'd be good. And they answer some of those questions. So even though they normally don't have U.S. customers involved, they can facilitate it for U.S. customers.
I see.
And so what you would end up doing is there's a contract address that you would send it to, because it's a ERC20 token that you end up getting, the wrapped Litecoin. So you send the actual Litecoin to this contract address, and then it's changed into wrapped Litecoin, and then you're able to send it out to whatever address you're able to, right? So if, like, again, as an example, if you wanted to send it to Edge Wallet, you could do that. Or like I did the other day, obviously I have to experiment with a lot of these things. I experiment with Cake Wallet and I experimented with Edge Wallet. You can go into Edge Wallet and actually just, if you have Litecoin on Edge Wallet, you can swap it into wrapped Litecoin.
Oh, really? So
I think so.
you can. Okay, that's cool. So somebody probably has to mint it first, and then there might be like a.
I'm trying to remember what I did the other day, but I have wrapped Litecoin on my Edge Wallet now.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I did it right there.
Cool. So anyways, yeah, if people that are listening, you can go to this wraplitecoin.org and then click the link that directs you to CoinUT, set up an account, and then I think it has to be at least one Litecoin, right? That you mint at a time. It can't be like 0.1 or can it?
So on Edge, it's it wasn't a full Litecoin.
Okay.
I think it was
cool.
either.
Awesome. Well, that's
I got to look at it now. Maybe that, I don't know if that was. I know he was still working on it. Let me bring up my.
Okay.
Look at it right now.
Yeah, we can check it out. I do think it'll be
That
popular.
might be a good. It could be a good homework assignment for everybody. Do that.
Yeah, you guys want some homework.
Wallet. And actually, that ends up helping these people who are these companies who are actually trying to help us and facilitate this.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Okay, so it's still in Litecoin. I have not actually swapped it over. Let me see if I can do it right now while we're doing this, and see if it's now able to do that. Source wallet, receiving wallet, wrap Litecoin. Do the max. Hang tight, searching for the best exchange. No, still not able to do it on there. Okay, so if you do, so it's not able to swap from Litecoin to wrap Litecoin yet on Edge Wallet, but you can store wrap Litecoin on it. So if you went to, see, these are all the steps that I was talking about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to the wraplitecoin.org and go through the process of sending Litecoin through the contract address, converting it into wrapped Litecoin, then you could send it technically to Edge Wallet and store it there. And they are working on the swapping aspect and they're working on the staking part, but those they take time. So
for sure, yeah, that makes sense. Well, at least it's progressing, and it probably once all those pieces come together, I would assume get at least some level of adoption.
Right.
But we'll see.
So they end up being kind of like our prototype now, right? Edge Wallet. But once they have it done, as I said, there's other wallets that are already interested in adding it. One's a startup, another one is very well established in the space, and I think people will be very happy once they actually do that. So I'm kind of tipping my hand here a little bit, but it'll become more prevalent on more wallets as time goes by, just like we're also working to try and get more wallets to add MWEB Litecoin as well, like Cake Wallet did. That's
gotcha.
I think that's a little bit of a harder on the dev side to do because of the syncing of the nodes. And
for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, cool. You guys have done a lot. So you've done MWEB, this wrapped Litecoin, made Litecoin a better money, and some people now think it's a better Bitcoin. What would you say are the future things you guys are excited about working on? You mentioned a stable coin. Is that after wrapped Litecoin the next thing that
I would anticipate
trying? Okay.
I would anticipate there being an effort to make a stable coin. Really like finding the right chain to build it on. I mean, do people want their stable coin, their Litecoin backed stable coin, to be built on Solana? Do they want it built on, a different chain? I'd love to hear what people want it built on, to be honest. I'm open to suggestions for that. So if people want to, either at me on X and tell me what they want to see it on, that's fine. And then I can look more into that, and I'd be giving that feedback to the group back at the foundation so we can figure out who can help make that happen. That would be great.
Awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
We're
Let
open to
David
any
know.
community feedback. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. One other question. I heard, I don't know if this is part of the foundation or if it's just something Loshan's working on, but I heard of Nexus Wallet and seeing the Litecoin account tweet about it. Is that something you guys have been collaborating on recently?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything you guys can talk about in regards to the Nexus Wallet? Like what features it'll have, what you're excited about, or is it kind of a like private?
I think so. Loesch has worked really hard on that. I really don't want to steal any of his thunder.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I'll refrain, but I would say that, like, you know, we're forward thinking, and you know, I think people will be happy with it.
Awesome. Well,
So
that's
I
exciting.
think he's going to try and have a reveal here sometime fairly soon. Obviously, with development, you know, timelines move a little bit, but I would anticipate hopefully some sort of unveiling of it here pretty quick.
Okay, very cool. Well, one of the last things I wanted to ask you about, I know the Litecoin Foundation struggled with funding, but if price does start increasing, like my whole goal was to try to cover this stuff live, so kind of cover technical analysis, fundamental analysis, bring in a lot of the Litecoin community members to this channel, hopefully grow it, and potentially, if price does increase, maybe do like fundraising efforts for the Litecoin Foundation. Would it be possible that we could collaborate on something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
If
we
the
can do
channel
that now.
does grow.
Yeah. You know, they have the bounties, right? So you can already help donate. We have the bounty site that was put up by Indigo. So there's another, that's another thing. The other thing I'm excited about is we're starting to have a fresh group of volunteers coming through wanting to help in certain areas. And so Indigo is a perfect example of that. He's put together a bounty program on his own. He did that on his own first with the community, was able to help support some bounties for a few improvements and things that have happened over the last year for Litecoin, some explorers and some other things. And we were able to ask him, did he want to try and help under the umbrella of the foundation, maybe grow the bounty program, and we can help facilitate some of that. And he was more than happy. Yeah, more than happy to do that. And so now that's already been in place for a while, but we're going to try and grow that even more here in the next year.
Yeah, maybe I could reach out to him. I think it'd be cool, and I think people would be more willing if price is quite high for Litecoin. If it does increase, they'd be, I think, willing to donate small amounts. Not everyone, obviously, but myself, I would. And I think the way I think about it, if I knew what the money was going towards, like we had specific bounty programs or specific projects that we knew the money was going towards, it'd be more eager to donate myself, and probably for others too. So it'd be cool. I'll talk to him and see what he's working on. But if it was something that like the community could vote on, or I could ask and reach out to people what they want to see done, because I know it's the foundation got a lot of criticism for the last few years, and I think really it's just because price action has been not the most exciting, and so people need someone to blame online. I actually think you guys have gotten a lot better, and a lot of the things that you've worked on were the right things, making Litecoin a better money. But if price does increase and people are more willing to donate, it would be cool to start thinking about specific projects that the community wants to see supported, whether it's marketing efforts or specific development things. I just had that thought come up into my mind. I don't have like specific things I'm thinking about now because you guys have done quite a few things, but maybe funding a stable coin on Litecoin, funding that seems to be popular. So it'd be cool to like partner with the Litecoin Foundation to help support the growth of something the community wants to see.
Yeah, that would be great. And again, like Wrap Litecoin, some of those projects become pretty cost prohibitive. So any donations that we could have funneled directly to that effort would be great. And so we understand that. We can only tell you so much how much we're trying to do, but at the end of the day, even if we have, improvements or developments come out, if price isn't really reflecting what people want it to look like, then it really doesn't matter what we've been doing almost to some degree for some people.
For sure.
Right? And it's
Yeah,
not a hit. That's not a dig on anybody. That's just, honestly, if you invest in something, you want to see the investment grow. You don't want it to see it stay the same for years on end or whatever. And so we understand that, but there are outside forces that have been, making that much more difficult than it probably should have been too. So
for sure. Yeah. 100% agree.
It's not all just because of marketing.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree. And the best marketing is price increasing. So people will see it if and when that does happen. But outside of like financial donations and support, what else do you think the community could do, if they're complaining, to help out, like in helping potentially increase the value of Litecoin?
I mean, again, like complaining isn't necessarily bad, right? Because there are some reasons to be disappointed, right? But I guess the thing is, and there's been obviously attempts to help in the past, and sometimes they pan out and sometimes they don't. But I would like to think, if you look at the Bitcoin ecosystem, they talk about network effects in the Bitcoin ecosystem. They don't have a real functioning like foundation. The foundation they had at the beginning it toppled, it fell apart, right? So that kind of got reinvented into some other organizations, but ultimately, like, the success that Bitcoin has had is from a lot of individuals who had either the drive, the resources, the time, the money, or a combination of all of those, who then decided that they were going to make an impact for Bitcoin. And, if they could, while doing that, also maybe even make a living out of it, right? And
for sure,
not everybody has to make a living out of it, but there are ways to still contribute to an overall ecosystem in different ways. And so when you look at the success Bitcoin has had, that was a grassroots effort too, right? When you look at that, just because it's a couple years older, but look at how many people around the world have done some sort of advocating or pushing or inventing or collaborating of some sort, put their own money and their own time and efforts into it, some probably losing substantial amounts of money, some gaining substantial amounts of money doing it. But the foundation is there to help. But if the foundation goes away and everything falls apart, then it was never really that decentralized to begin with. So,
for sure.
So efforts can happen outside of the foundation's sphere of influence, and they should. So I would say, if you have people that are talented in business or people that are talented in other areas, you can make a difference as a collective. So that's something that I'm excited about, trying to get the folks with the Litecoin handle and other means of influence to sort of impart to the community as well, as you can make a difference.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's an important message for everyone, because, like you said, Bitcoin was a grassroots movement. It took a lot of individual efforts. There's been a lot of notable people who worked basically for free, like Andreas Antonopoulos with his educational stuff. He hardly held any Bitcoin and didn't really benefit, but he provided so much value.
I think I actually remember, didn't like at one point a bunch of people donated Bitcoin to him because of all of his efforts over the years?
Yeah, they did, because he said he didn't have very much, and so people wanted to give back to him because he did drive a lot of adoption, and he broke down things in a simple way, like complex topics, and made it easy to digest. So he had a huge influence. And eventually the community gave back to him. So it was cool to see.
And I guess the other thing would be, I would be excited to see, and not in a toxic way or a negative way, but to see more Litecoiners stand up against other chains, and specifically probably, there's a lot of good Bitcoiners out there, don't get me wrong, but there are some Bitcoiners who have a lot of self-interest at heart that have, like, they've literally thwarted things that have been in the works for Litecoin in the past.
For sure.
So just people to be able to stand up and say, you know what, there's nothing wrong with being a fan of Litecoin, and I'm happy with it, and I have no problem stating it or backing it, or being an apologist for it or whatever else, right? And that's how, like, when you're persistent, that's how you end up getting on a BitPay or a blockchain.com or any of the other ones who for the longest time just kept saying no, and then finally they relent because they see it's not going anywhere.
For sure. Yeah, there are a lot. I think it's just the competitive nature of markets, and this is sort of like a zero-sum game as far as speculative capital goes, and they're trying to convey the narrative that Bitcoin will be the one and only money that exists, and everything goes to zero against it. So it is self-interest, and it is in some ways kind of counter to the free market ethos that a lot of them say they believe in. But it would be cool to see more Litecoiners stand up to that, and do it in like a nice, respectful, and like educated way, where you're just proving your point without looking like they look sometimes by being toxic.
Exactly.
That's what I've been trying to do, because I do really think Litecoin is basically the second Bitcoin chain being monetized, and it does have a lot of features now that may, to some people, make it more attractive to use than Bitcoin. Last thing I'll ask you, and then I have a few questions that I got in the chat for you, if you're okay with answering a few questions for like 5 minutes. So like looking back at the whole journey through the last 7-8 years, I know you said at some points you wanted to quit. I think a lot of us have felt that psychologically. A lot of people, especially in replies to my tweets, have been almost ready to give up, it seems like. What have been your kind of the opposite, like the proudest moments or things you look back on like the most fondly throughout the last 8 years, and specifically regards to the work with the Litecoin Foundation, Litecoin itself?
I think some of the proudest would be, so I think one of the funnest ones was probably, there's two. There's the first summit, and I got to actually meet a lot of the people that I had been talking to online for quite some time about Litecoins. That was pretty fun. But the accomplishment of putting it together with a group of people that I hadn't even physically met before, didn't know before that, and to see that actually came to fruition and was successful, that was pretty cool. So that was a pretty proud moment for all of us. I think another one was breaking through with the UFC sponsorship, where it was on the mat. That was kind of like a last minute thing that happened. There was a guy who used to be with the foundation. He ended up being tied to the parent company that ran the UFC, and said they had just had a sponsor back out. So we scrambled and did what we could to make that happen, and then went out there to the venue. It was originally supposed to be in Las Vegas, and then John Jones failed his drug test or whatever, so then they moved it to LA, and it was out in LA. And we were actually sitting there and watching the event with the Litecoin logo on the mat, and then we got to go onto the mat into the octagon after it was all done, and take pictures there on the mat, and speak to some people and stuff, and so that was really cool, and that sparked a lot of interest from other sports teams, from other organizations. I mean, I ended up talking to everybody from NASCAR to people in the European Cup League for soccer to Major League Baseball, NFL teams, large companies that put on concerts and whatever else, all because of that event, right? That sparked a huge flood of interest.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, most of them never came about because the ticket price that came with
Yeah.
associated with it, and over time you end up realizing, like I used to get all excited, be like, honey, tomorrow I got a call with the Boston Red Sox and they're interested in whatever, and then come to find out it was just the same thing over and over again. They looked at Litecoin as a Visa or a MasterCard or whatever, and
Hmm.
they wanted some 7-figure number for X amount of whatever, and it was all just the same thing over and over again. But to have that first event happen and the excitement that came around there, I ended up on
Hmm.
Cheddar talking about it, Cheddar News and stuff, and I was just like, this this is really fun. And so those
Hmm.
two events themselves, that first summit and the UFC thing, those are pretty fun. Every summit ends up being really fun because now it turns into a family reunion. I see so many of the people I saw from
Oh yeah.
the first one, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool to meet people
Yeah.
you've never interacted with in real life for the first time. I remember like kids I used to play video games with when I was a really little kid, and then meeting them in real life was such a cool
Mhm.
experience. So yeah, it's super cool. And then the UFC stuff, I'm sure it was exciting, like being in the kind of in the spotlight. UFC is so huge now that
Yeah.
the attention from that is cool.
Yeah.
And I cut you off. Sorry. Was there
Oh
one
no,
other
that's
thing?
fine. And I'd say probably being able to start my own company to try and help with the adoption of crypto too. So I had for a short time there. I actually got killed off by the choke point, Operation Choke
Hmm.
Point 2.0. But we had a small company that allowed people to automatically convert any amount of their pay into Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Ethereum and send it out to as many wallets as they wanted to. So it would funnel straight in from their direct deposit,
Hmm.
however much they wanted. And then it automatically converted it into whatever they had told us ahead of time they wanted it to be converted into. And then it got us sent out to all the different wallets they wanted. And it happened automatically every time money came into that account. And
Yeah, it was
so
a cool idea. It's
yeah,
that
it
you.
was great. And it was really fun to see people like emailing and saying, this was so easy to do. Thank you for making this happen. And now I can dollar cost average. I don't have to go through the big exchanges. We had a very, very fair rate. But unfortunately it was during a bear market and we struggled through. But when they started going around after FTX and Silvergate went down, and then the other one went down, Silicon, they started pressuring the banks. They can't tell them not to have accounts for crypto companies or whatever, but they could definitely make life a lot harder for them, and that's what they did. And so ours was one of them that got caught up in the chopping block there, and we had to shut down. But it was an experience that I value very much because it taught me a lot more about the business side than I was already
Hmm.
experiencing as a partnerships director.
For sure. That makes sense. I was going to ask you about that, but I kind of knew what happened, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about it. But it's cool to know that you had a positive experience despite kind of getting forced down
Mm-hmm.
by the
Mm-hmm.
government. Um, I have a question here in the chat. It's from DeFlanders. He said to ask you about NIMIC and 1031 Bank and kind of what happened with that, because I know there were some banks that were going to add Litecoin support, but we didn't hear much after.
I'm not quite sure. I'm going to be honest. I don't know what NIMIC is, but the 1031, that's that partnership's no more. So that was an experience that had its run and just really didn't develop into anything. So that is
I
no
see.
more. Yeah,
Gotcha.
there's things that I mean, obviously 1031. There's other things that have happened over the last few years. People still ask about now and then, and
Hmm.
with the 1031 one was just something that it was exciting at the time, and it just never really came to be anything. So
Yeah. Things you try things, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I remember there's like Light Pay and some other credit card, debit card type things that
yeah,
kind of
LifePay
not
was
as
right
well.
before. Yeah, LifePay was right before I joined the foundation, and that that definitely was an eyesore for them early on in the foundation's history.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was stressed upon from that point on. Whenever we do anything that has to do with partnerships, we do a lot of due diligence and a lot of very deliberate steps in everything. No, pre-announcements of announcements and all kinds of right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
just a
makes sense.
learning experience, I guess.
Yeah, for sure, and that's okay. I think everyone needs to realize that a lot of them were just volunteers at the foundation originally and
Mm-hmm.
learning new things on the go, and
And they may
you
not
shouldn't
have
have
even
like
had experience in those things, right? They were just
mm-hmm.
a group of guys and people that wanted to do right, and maybe thought, okay, well, we can get this off the ground, and then they realized, okay, we need more people that have specific talents and experiences to to be a part of that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't see any other questions. If you guys want to post a question, you can. I can ask him while he's here.
yeah, I can answer
If I don't
anything
see,
past, present, or future, whatever.
perfect. If not, because I'm not seeing a ton. Do you have any final things that I didn't ask you about that you're excited to talk about, or just maybe give general advice for newcomers to the space? Because I know we have a few new people in here.
Yeah, I mean, I do see one question about OmniLite. If it's still
Okay.
active, I believe so, in the sense that it's available, but I don't think it's really that active, to be honest.
Somebody wants your Litecoin price prediction as well. I know you don't typically talk
I
about
don't
price.
normally do that. Yeah, so my whole thing has always been watch the data, the metrics of usage and utility, and at some point it's got to catch up. And I do strongly believe that there has been intentional suppression of the price meeting the utility. So when that ends,
For
I have
sure.
no idea. But I would think the one thing that I've always taken away from Charlie, either from times I've heard him talk or conversations that him and I have had personally, is if you're putting away money that you were going to probably use for something else anyway, and you weren't really looking to get that money back, if that's the money you're using to invest in crypto, then you should be able to be patient enough to just let things evolve as they're going to evolve, right? Because investments,
Mm-hmm.
some happen quick and some happen slow, but the ones that usually happen extremely quick can also die off very quick, and we see that all the time in crypto.
For sure.
But if you can see that there's continual growth and usage in something, the law of gravitational pull is at some point the value will catch up to the utility and the usage and the effort that's been put into it.
100%. Yeah, it represents real demand, and with Litecoin, you see it holding up throughout the bear markets, unlike a lot of these other chains. And Litecoin's kind of an anomaly there. It's like the only coin that has gone up in usage despite price decreasing. So
Yeah.
eventually that does play out as long as demand continues to increase or stays steady. And then with Litecoin, it seems likely. So that's really good advice. Any other final
I'm trying to
thoughts?
scan through and see what other questions. Let's see. Did the bank in Germany thing, OmniLite.
I'm trying to read on my phone. It's a little hard.
When does the El Salvador NDA expire? Yeah. How much time do we have?
We kind of just go for. I don't really have a time limit. I try to keep it to like an hour and a half or so, but it's really up to you. We have as much time as you need. If you wanted to talk about this NDA with El Salvador, I'm sure a lot of people are interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, I'd like to.
If you can't.
I was just talking to Alan and Charlie about this week, actually. How many people don't know, I guess, what we're talking about with the El Salvador thing?
Um,
Do you remember?
I'd say that I remember it, but I guess maybe some background context might be helpful if you don't mind.
Right. So I think the only thing people really know at this point was Charlie and a small group of others that were with him at the time on a plane flew to El Salvador, and they were in Salvador for a short period of time. And there were a couple of tweets I think put out with like them sitting in the plane and stuff, right? So, and then of course that sparks a lot of interest and theories of what they're doing and so on and so forth. And I can give you my first person experience with that, and I think we're okay to actually talk about this now. So we'll see what comes of it. But I don't know if I'll tell you everything in complete detail, but I can definitely give you some information on it. So yes, they did fly to El Salvador. Yes, there was a purpose behind it, right? It wasn't just a thing to kind of create some speculation or whatever else. But on that plane was Charlie and Alan, and they were representing the Litecoin Foundation. I was back in Wisconsin at the time. Others on the plane were John Kim and eCurrency Hodler. They were not tied to the purpose behind necessarily the flight there, but they were a part of just going there and supporting Charlie and Alan and myself. So, and you know, maybe taking a few sites while they're there. But the story goes, oh man, I was just looking this stuff up yesterday too, on the spot. I got to try and find it, but I have all the communication and other things here. Anyway, back, let me do this real quick. I'm going to do a search on my email again. Sorry for the pause.
Oh yeah, no worries.
But I've gotten this question. I know others have gotten this question over the years, so I feel like we're able to do this now. So
cool.
1 second. So this is where the story breaks. It breaks on your thing, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, maybe this will. I didn't really set this channel up to like try to promote myself or get super popular. I just felt like there's kind of a void for technical analysis and like a void on YouTube for Litecoin. But yeah, maybe it'll help the channel out, and it should help all of us.
Yeah. So, all right. November 9th, 2021. Received an email, and there was a letter attached to it, and the email was sent to just a general foundation email, and it was forwarded to me just based off of my role at the time, projects director and partnerships and stuff. So I got this email, and I was looking it up, and attached was a letter from, I want to make sure I say this right, basically the national energy company of El Salvador. So yeah, things are nationalized there, right? So this is an energy company that helps provide energy for the country of El Salvador. It's called the CEL. So Comisión Ejecutiva Hidroeléctrica del Rio Lempa, right? So That was my slaughtering of Spanish, by the way. But anyway, so it's CEL for short, Cell. And the president of Cell at the time wrote a letter to Charlie and the Litecoin Foundation, actually requesting assistance. And the assistance had to do with basically helping to advise them on how to set up some crypto-related stuff having to do with their mining operations. So first thing I had to do was go ahead and do my due diligence, go through, make sure this wasn't a fake email, first of all. So I did some research on Cell and the individual that was on the letter. It's obviously a notarized stamp letter. And went through there, and I sent it to Charlie and asked him, hey, this looks like it's actually legit. Do you want me to go ahead and reply to them? And he said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And that kind of started a interaction between us and Cell having to do with their request for assistance in setting up this program with the miners and, be located near the volcano, so on and so forth. And this would be mining Bitcoin, and then also how to figure out how to store the crypto and so on and so forth. So started the interaction with them, had some emails and some calls, video calls, and then it was agreed upon that a team from the foundation would go down to an on-site review of everything, right? Like where everything was going to go and what was going to happen. And so that was agreed upon, but you got to remember this is during the time of the pandemic, and some of my personal choices were different than maybe some of your guys's or whatever, but I chose not to have myself tested at all. I never got any vaccines or anything. And so at that time, there were still requirements to do certain things. So me sort of like spearheading the effort to do this with the foundation and CEL, I chose to stay back, but we were able to have the meeting there in the conference room at CEL with them, where I could join in by Zoom, and the rest of them, Charlie and Alan. And by the way, I'm not going to drop the name right now, but there was a very avid Bitcoiner who was involved as well. Yeah, I'll drop the name. It's Samson Mao.
Oh, cool.
Samson, yeah, so we had him there because he had some experience already with El Salvador and some of the things that were going on. So within the conference room itself, you had these Cell individuals, and then on the other side of the table was Charlie, Allen, and Samson, and then on Zoom was me. So had the call, and then they went and visited the site after that, and then Samson had another event that he went to during that time that he was invited to go to, and so I think Charlie and Allen went to it, and I think maybe E and John were there too. And then from there, we started negotiating what would advising look like or whatever. And so this went on for like 6 to 8 months. About the 6-month mark, communication pretty much just dropped off, right? But prior to that, we had been working with them, having calls and emails, sort of going through how they were going to maneuver and do all of these things.
Gotcha.
And one of the things that we were looking to have as part of the agreement to advise them was to have at some point a certain percentage of maybe some of the mining equipment being Litecoin miners, right? So then they could optimize their mining capabilities by having Bitcoin mining, and maybe when, it was a little bit harder to mine Bitcoin for a profit, add in some Litecoin mining or however they wanted to do it. But that was sort of one of the stipulations to it.
I see.
And in general, they were agreeing to that, but they weren't giving a timetable as to when or any of that stuff. But Yeah, somewhere along in the progression there, the communication just pretty much like died off. And to this day, we don't necessarily know exactly why or what happened as to why it just sort of died off. But we have our guesses. And
Mm-hmm.
as you can see, El Salvador is really a Bitcoin only type
Yeah.
place right now. And I think as you would go back in the history of how that has transpired, there have been certain people within that realm of, having their hands near the government that potentially could have had influence on that. I'm not saying they did, but for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, we went from having the president of the CEL, who was a Bitcoin holder or a Litecoin holder, and talked about
Mm-hmm.
that, and was obviously a fan of Charlie's because he talked about the things Charlie had done at Coinbase with the foundation, his advocacy for Bitcoin, and asked for advice from him and the foundation on how to do these things. So there was interest. We were not the ones contacting them, they contacted us. So this is all still
Interesting.
very delicate, and I'm trying not
Yeah,
to make it sound like it's a salty, whatever, but you got to also understand that this was going to be a pretty significant thing for Litecoin, right? We're very
for
excited about it.
sure. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, they just kind of ghosted you guys after you gave
Yeah,
them
yeah, yeah.
advice. You flew down.
Yes, I had to send a couple emails at the end there where I'm like, look, can you at least acknowledge that you're receiving these emails? We're not getting any replies. And then finally, there was basically a very short, yes, we received your email, and that was about it, right? And then that was the end
Wow.
of it.
Well, it's
So
interesting. Kind of aligns with the censorship of Litecoin
yeah, it's a
from
very
various
good
other
example of
entities.
it. It's a very good
Yeah,
example of it, and it was very frustrating. And you can imagine putting, like, I'd like to say that was one of my most exciting things that I've done with the foundation, and it ends up being one of the most frustrating things I've done with the foundation, because here you think you're finally getting the respect of, people outside of this sphere of influence that Bitcoin had, and yet still at the end of the day, Bitcoin wins and Litecoin is shoved to the side and ridiculed for not having any interest in it. When, I mean, if there's no interest in Litecoin or what the foundation's doing, why were we the ones that were contacted by the energy company of El
yeah,
Salvador?
yeah. It's super strange to me from my perspective. I almost have theories around potentially like state operatives, trying to push Bitcoin only. I think that's possible in an attempt to, kind of centralize Bitcoin in the hands of custodians, and then eventually do what they did with gold, and then suppress all the competition,
Yeah.
issue paper receipts against Bitcoin, and control it. So yeah, I don't know what's actually going on. It's possible to know, but it is like fishy to me.
And it's not to point any fingers at anybody, because we asked Samson to be a part of it because he had experience with El Salvador already, right? And he was working on, it was the
Hmm.
beginning stages of him working on like a bond for them. And so he already had connections to the government. I mean, who knows who put the kibosh on it? But basically, the same people that we had started working out with this whole thing on, they ended up no longer being a part of it at the end. So it seems to me like there were even a change of hands on some things
Yeah,
within the government itself. So who knows if it came from the president on down himself? I don't know. Was it from other influences outside of the government who were having an impact? I don't know. And I won't say it was any of them because I
hmm,
really don't know. So I don't, like I said, I don't want it to sound like it's a salty thing, but it's a very sensitive subject for us because that could have been a big, coming out party for Litecoin in multiple ways, having a sovereign nation, mining Litecoin alongside Bitcoin, potentially looking at it later on in some other capacities. Um, so,
for sure.
and I mean,
Yeah.
none of it's made up. I have the initial letter. I have the emails. I have a
Hmm.
photo. I have a photo I took on Zoom of everybody sitting in that conference room with their masks on, talking. You can see,
Hmm.
Charlie sitting at the table. You can see, Samson in the corner. You can see the people on the other side.
Yeah, it's
None of that's made up. That's not who I am. I don't do that. So
for sure. Yeah, I 100% believe that to be the case, and it's interesting. Yeah, you like you said, you don't know who it was, but something happened. As has happened historically with Litecoin specifically, and it's kind of disappointing, especially since they reached out to you and then they took a lot of your advice and people went down there to give their time and expertise, and then they just ghost you. So it's
yeah, and I don't know how much of I don't know how much of the advice they actually took,
yeah.
and I don't. There are some things that we talked about that I still like. I think those, by not talking about them, would honor the NDA, right? I'm giving you more like the
Mm-hmm.
general understanding of why we were there, what happened. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they come flying back. They're obviously happy. They're excited. John takes some photos, you know,
Mm-hmm.
puts them on Twitter, and then everybody goes crazy, and then nothing comes of
Mm-hmm.
it. So,
Yeah. Well,
but
at
I mean,
least
that's
we
not
can
his fault
understand
either.
what
He's,
happened.
he's happy for everybody. He's, he gets to see these things transpire, and everybody was okay with, putting it out there. So, I mean, that's not the problem. The problem is you go 6 to 8 months into this process, and then basically nothing happens. And
Yeah, they led you on, and then
Mhm.
yeah, something happened. So that's disappointing, but at least we know the story now and what happened, and you guys were trying to do the right thing and understandably excited about it. It's just unfortunate that it didn't transpire. But honestly, it might be one of the biggest regrets of them in the future, right? If Litecoin price outperforms
Mhm.
Bitcoin, they'll kick themselves and
Right. I mean, honestly, even if they wouldn't have ended up continuing, um, and technically we gave them advice and never actually really got anything out of it, and because we were being nice enough to continue talking to them, even though the agreement was never fully signed. So that goes into another well-intentioned,
mm-hmm,
thing coming back
for
to
sure.
bite you in the rear end, because you hope for the best out of people. And like I said, I have no idea what happened on their end either. Maybe they're, like I said, they were probably forced to change course or whatever. But I know
Yeah.
these things happen in real life all over the place in different scenarios. This just happened to be the one that happened with El
Mm-hmm.
Salvador, right? So this is one of those, like, remember those comic books, the what if comic books, where like, what if Spider-Man had died or whatever? How would that look?
Oh
Kind of.
yeah.
This is
Yeah,
kind of like one of those
exactly.
what if things. Like, what if we actually would have gone through with the entire process, and there would be, even if it's 5% of miners in El Salvador were Litecoin miners, being utilized, that still would have been a win.
Yeah, 100%. It's like the butterfly effect. It could have been a dramatic different future, at least maybe in terms of price, or sentiment and coverage. Yeah, it could have done a lot. But I do appreciate you sharing that for the first time here with us, because people
Mm-hmm.
have been interested in it for so long. So thank you so much for
Mm-hmm.
explaining that. I think the community can understand that it was well intentioned and
Yeah,
it
no,
wasn't
I
really
appreciate
anyone's.
that. I appreciate that. And there's been many efforts where I think there's been some tampering that has
Mm-hmm.
occurred. So I want everybody to know that the foundation really does have the best interests of Litecoin, the currency, and Litecoin, the community, at heart. And we do try very hard. I think we just seem to experience a lot of headwinds, maybe more than you know, others with
Mm-hmm.
more money and more influence behind them, experience.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's just like, yeah, it's hard with not as much money because it leads to less influence, and then also it's competing with Bitcoin in a sense. So you get all this. It's almost like political lobbying against Litecoin,
Yes,
and
that's exactly
so you're
how. Yeah.
it's on like multiple fronts, which makes it extremely hard. And then you guys look. It makes you look bad, even though I understand why it's
Absolutely.
happening, and it shouldn't be a negative reflection on the foundation.
Mhm.
So I think you guys are going to be vindicated, though. this bull market cycle. And then, if price is above all-time highs, nobody's, the sentiment around the Litecoin Foundation probably changes a lot, especially if MWEB gets adoption, if Wrap Litecoin does. I mean, you guys got a lot of stuff to show for the work you've put in. So I really appreciate you coming on here, and also I appreciate you sticking around, because I don't know what would have happened if the Litecoin Foundation, failed, and a lot of you guys that had been there early on, decided not to continue and persist. Maybe MWEB wouldn't be a thing, and maybe these recent developments wouldn't have happened either. So it really takes a lot of strength to do that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You will eventually.
Yeah, I'm just very appreciative for a core of good people and now what I consider friends, helping each other, stay afloat and keep focused and energized. And like I said, we all understand people's frustration and disappointment and whatever words you want to use. Some of it warranted, some of it obviously probably not warranted, but at the same time, everybody's going to have their ideas of how things are supposed to be or what happened. And I just want you to understand that there's always backstories to everything that goes on. And if you don't have the full context of things, it's always better usually not to jump to conclusions necessarily immediately. Exactly. So,
yeah, 100% agree. Well, I think that we've gone about 2 hours. Again, I appreciate the time. I think we're going to win this cycle for sure. And so it'll be exciting to watch what happens over the next few months. So all the community members, long-term community members, there's a lot of good people out there. I really want to see them win. And hopefully when price increases, the narrative around Litecoin can counter, the Bitcoin maximalists that have had so much popularity these last 7 years. It'll be cool to see everyone kind of be vindicated.
Yeah, I think that'll be one of the finer moments. When you ask me again next time in an interview, what are some of the proudest moments will be when I see so many people happy with the decision that they've made, and hopefully maybe some of the commitments that they've made to, make Litecoin the digital silver for the world and a currency and a form of value that people trust and understand to be exactly what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I think it can make a huge difference in the future. Well, thanks again, David. I really appreciate everything you've done, and hopefully we can have you on here again in the future when new exciting developments come from the foundation, or if we can partner for like a fundraising thing. I've been trying to put out content. I've been trying to grow this stream, grow education, and really I'm trying to capture an audience by being here when price starts to increase so I can explain the fundamental value proposition and really push back against the narrative that I think is untrue that's being promoted by a lot of like billionaires and people with influence in the space. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I know there'll be plenty of opportunities to do just that, and hopefully we can win over some of these people with more influence too. Unfortunately, it'll probably be because price is going up, right? But I mean, over time, whatever help you can get is the help that you can get, and that's all good help at the end, hopefully. So,
for sure, cool. Well, I hope to meet you in real life at the next summit or whenever we have another Litecoin event, and yeah, we'll keep in touch and hopefully can work on things for Litecoin together in the future.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to come back on once we have all the details of the summit out there for the public too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, for sure. We could promote that on this channel and hopefully get a record number of people there. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
good idea.
Yeah, that'd be great. I want us to run out of tickets.
Yeah, that'd be cool. All right, David. Well, have a good rest of your night. Sorry I took up so much of your time, but again, thank you.
No, it's been wonderful, and I appreciate all your questions and the way you frame them, and I appreciate everybody that came on here, and you guys support Matt and everything he's doing, and support the foundation and just Litecoin in general, and just please always just remember to be good people first, and everything else will fall in line for you.
For sure. Great advice. Go follow David at DaddyCool1991 on X. Last thing, are there any other places you exist on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not a huge fan of it because it's just literally like everybody who wants to connect is just trying to pitch you on something. So, but I'm on LinkedIn, but mostly X, and even then I take breaks from it now and then. Like you'll see there's gaps where I haven't done anything for a period of time just because I need to get away for a little bit. But
yeah, for sure.
That's probably the easiest way. And then if anybody wants to get a hold of me for anything, you can contact me at David Schwartz at litecoin.net.
Okay, perfect. David Schwartz, just like it's spelled here, at litecoin.net. Cool. All right, thanks, David. Well, enjoy the rest of your night, and thanks again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You guys take care.
All right, see ya.
Right. Yep.
Cool, guys. Well, that's David Schwartz from the Litecoin Foundation. Again, been involved for so long. Gotten a lot of hate, but I think we should show them support because they've really done a lot given how much funding they've had. I'm going to turn on the music here again. Thanks for sticking around, everyone. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the YouTube channel, that helps me out. Rob, you came late to the party. Well, you can rewatch it if you want to. Watch it on like 2x speed. David broke some interesting news about the El Salvador NDA stuff that was going on a few years back. For the first time, give us a good explanation on that. That was super interesting, and I think a lot of people in the community would want to watch and listen to. Thanks, CryptoCalm. Litecoin gets so much hate, yeah. It's pretty unwarranted because it's the most adopted network. What happened to price? Nothing really. I'm going to use the bathroom again. Hopefully price bumps. I've had to go for a while. Alright guys, what are we doing now? Big Nothing Burger. I thought it was cool. There's a lot to talk about. Master, oh cool, you caught the David on El Salvador stuff. That was interesting. Well, El Salvador got a lot of hype originally on. The whole community was obsessed with El Salvador in the last cycle. It could have been huge news. And definitely, like, at least credibility in a lot of people's eyes if that transpired into something. Let's see if this can break out. I don't know. I really don't. Yeah, imagine if that played out. It would have been wild. We're going to speculative attack Litecoin. I think there has been that. I think it's going to unwind. It's like a true underdog story. Litecoin here. This music makes your wiener soft. Okay, let's change it. How about this one? I listened to this before though. How about this? MacGyver getting the nitty-gritty details. Yeah, that was cool. Well, I don't think we have much else to talk about. Nothing really happened with lower time frames. Price. What is actually moving? Nothing really. Bitcoin dominance just looks like it had a quick pump and it's about to roll over again. Dump it. Get better charts. Putin talking about improvements in crypto. Talking about LTC. I haven't heard much on nation state news with crypto outside of like US strategic reserve, China unbanning it or owning it legal. Yeah, like when you see Max Holy Trinity. Need a better DJ. Yeah, it's hard because I don't have, you can't use like real music. I have to make my own. Got off the phone with your mom. What did I miss? Missed a lot, man. David gave us the breakdown on the El Salvador news that unfortunately didn't transpire into anything. Putin's talking about Litecoin specifically. I think Litecoin's kind of popular in Russia, actually. As far as like usage goes. Doesn't even show you the search graph. Do they censor their internet or something? Why isn't it showing the chart? More likely than Elon talking about it. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Me, I don't care who talks about it. I think people naturally talk about it as price goes up. Probably somebody influential will, but it's not like it's not changed my view or anything. All right, guys, I'm gonna log off, end the stream here, because I don't have anything to say outside of what I've already said. I think this is going to continue higher. I think eventually LTC BTC will break to the upside. But thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. We don't have anyone being interviewed tomorrow, but we will have Charlie Lee, I believe, on next Friday. And then Paul Stork, Truthcoin, very early Bitcoin guy. I have some things I want to ask him about. He's been around since like the beginning. So that'll be cool. That's Saturday at noon Eastern. Alright. Love you too. See you guys later. Have a good night. Okay. You're gonna be max treasure tomorrow, John. And tell me how Bitcoin's the best. And why you cut the money deal. Perfect. Alright guys, peace out.
In a world where digital currencies reign supreme, one cryptocurrency is poised to redefine the game, though. Litecoin's resurrection and resurgence is coming, and the Litecoin forecast is your 24/7 guide to riding this silver surge. Join us as we stream continuously, analyzing every move, discussing macroeconomic trends, what's driving this bull market, what narratives will come into play as we move higher, and what we'll be watching for signs of a broad market top T. The Litecoin forecast illuminating the path to redemption, hosted by Litecoin, joining us now.